Number 31. Sophistry is the way of the world. I began these presentations with a rather bold statement that you are being manipulated. You're being manipulated by the news, by universities, by entertainment, by corporations, and by political leaders. To prove this, you need only pay critical attention. Examples abound. But this state of affairs is not the result of some kind of grand, overarching conspiracy by some centralized governmental agency or some sinister conglomeration of corporate interests. Of course, sometimes this actually may be true, or it even could be partially true today, or at least some of the times it's true. But it's not always true. What is true is that sophistry and manipulation is truly the way of the world. We are born thinkers, and as a result, become born manipulators in short order. Infants are naturally egocentric. His or her needs supersede everything else, as it should be. We are born helpless. We depend on our parents for literally everything. As a species, we grow slowly. It takes many years before we become self-sufficient enough to become independent agents. Because our needs are paramount to us, it takes a certain amount of discipline and learning before we begin to acquire concepts that lead to critical thinking. Now, we take to thinking easily enough. We've evolved to reason. But the tendency to always think of ourselves first, and perhaps without any regard to others, is always there. Some never grow out of it. Along with learning how to think comes the realization of how easy it is for us to get what we want by manipulating one another instead of reasoning with one another. It's not as though we completely disregard reasoning. We simply use it to learn how to manipulate each other in more sophisticated ways. We become sophists instead of critical thinkers. Critical thinking is a discipline. As such, it takes discipline to acquire. Ultimately, critical thinking is the core of every single intellectual pursuit man involves himself in. This is because critical thinking is the pinnacled use of our mind. Unfortunately, though it is possible, no society on the face of this earth throughout history has yet decided to place the concept of critical thinking at its heart. Instead of competing on the field of reason and encouraging a meritocracy of talent and concept, we cheat by taking shortcuts. We use power as a substitute for reason. Governments use implied violence as a mechanism for control. Our schools and universities, instead of teaching critical thinking, actively discourage it, favoring their own doctrine instead. From their perspective, critical thinking is an existential threat to the status quo. They are correct. True critical thinking is radical. It is dangerous. So much of our society is based upon irrational, unreasonable, and manipulative structures. Socrates was put to death for this reason. By simply questioning the fundamentals of the status quo and asking if it was virtuous, he became an existential threat to the state. History has not been kind to critical thinkers. It is a risk. But if thinking critically is a risk, not thinking critically is an even greater one today. Our lives depend on the quality of our thinking. We have no other way to survive. Eventually, irrationally formed societies implode upon themselves. Your very survival depends on your ability to live by your wits. The closer societies adhere to the principles of reason, the more sound they are. In number 32, I show you how to battle sophistry.